Welcome to Vermont Today. I'm your host, Terry Holman, and my co-host is Anju Marie Whalen, and our guest today is Leslie Holman. Leslie is a immigration lawyer here in Burlington, and Leslie brought her assistant with her, Dougal. Leslie, would you like to tell our viewers a little bit about your background?
Sure, it's nice to be here and thanks for getting up in the morning with me. I am originally from New York City. I lived there until I was just about 14 years old, and then my parents moved to the very end of Long Island, a completely rural community that today people have heard of. Back then they didn't. It's called the North Fork of Long Island. I went to undergrad in Massachusetts, returned to New York, went to law school at Hofstra University on Long Island, and became a lawyer in 1987. But I didn't start out practicing immigration. I started out, I was doing product liability litigation and worked for large firms, including Wall Street, before I settled here and started practicing immigration.
We have something in common. I went to Northeastern University in Boston, and then I went to Fordham Law School in New York City.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
So
we both got our undergraduate degrees in Massachusetts and our law degrees in New York.
And it's held us in good stead.
Yes.
I hope.
And now we're in Vermont.
Go figure.
When you were growing up in New York, you went to the L'École Française. For how many years were you there?
I was there from the age of 3 until 8th grade, through 8th grade. Or either to 8th grade or through 8th grade. It's, I think, up right to 8th grade. Because French school starts early. They have a pre-kindergarten, if you will. And it wasn't originally my intention. Neither of my parents were French. But we lived right on 93rd Street. And we lived right on 93rd Street, and they had done redistricting in the public school that my parents thought that I would be going to. Instead, I would have been bused somewhere further, and they wanted me to be able to walk to school. And the L'École Française was right around the corner. They liked the directrice, which is the lady who ran the school, and lo and behold, that's where they sent me.
That's the Upper East Side of Manhattan, right?
That's correct. Although the kindergarten was there, my parents weren't thinking down the road. The elementary school and junior high school was actually on 62nd Street. So, and it's no longer in existence, which is sad for me. And I was just home, actually visiting my parents' home, and I saw my yearbook. And it was an interesting school at the time because I went to school with Isaac Stern's children. A lot of performers, Joel Gray's kid. I mean, it was a very interesting school at the time. There were a lot of ambassadors' children, people who spoke French, predominantly, or had something in their background. So
with that early training in French, French must be almost your native language, just as English is.
I would say less so after I left there, but I end up speaking French in my practice, probably about, I certainly speak French every day. I had an au pair who used to say that I speak French comme une vache espagnole, which actually means, it's an idiom, and it means like a Spanish cow. But truth of the matter is, I'm relatively conversationally fluent. When I first actually moved up to Canada, it was funny because we took a drive in Quebec, and we're driving around and we were extremely lost, and my husband says, well, get out of the car and go ask that man for directions. So I did, and I got back in the car and he said, well, what did he say? And I said, I have no idea. I've never heard that language before.
Well, have you used your French in France and found a different response?
Interestingly, when I'm in France, people don't think that I'm American. Because, at the L'École Française, even from the age of 3, I can still remember the teachers going, ooh, 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 and, everything was accent. And so apparently people say that I don't have an accent when I speak French, that they always say, oh, where in France are you from? And I've also transitioned that I can understand the Québécois and the idioms, and so, and I do. I probably do speak. I speak French in my practice every day.
I started with French in high school, 3 years in high school. Then when I got to Paris, I wasn't able to do much of anything with it. So then I studied the Sorbonne in Paris, and after that I got to be fluent.
How nice for you.
And Terry and I both attend Pause Cafe whenever we can, which is local French conversation group.
Really?
Which
So,
has made me feel a lot more comfortable when I try to speak French.
and do you guys speak French amongst yourselves?
Well, peut-être.
Peut-être.
Quelquefois.
Quelquefois.
Again, there's that feeling of insecurity when you go to say a word you've never pronounced, and having a conversation group where everybody just listens and then we break out into English sometimes is a great kind of way to wet your feet in reacquiring a language or going back and trying to learn one.
So I studied at the Sorbonne, and then I lived in Montreal for 2 years. So I got to be fluent that way in both the Canadian and the Français International, Paris.
How nice for you. I know, for me it's interesting because when I hear people with a French accent, I almost automatically turn to French. And the other day my daughter said, "Why do you do that?" And I realized because when in school, we were not allowed to answer in English. So, and if you did, you were, either you got a dictée or you got some kind of extra devoir homework. So, my first inclination, if I hear a French accent, is I got to go into French. Got to go into French.
Well, Linda Pervier would love you. She's the president of the Alliance Française. I was going to ask you about growing up, your early influences. You're such a tremendous role model for women, having been so successful in your field. Can you tell us a little bit of who were the early influences in your life?
God, that's interesting. Certainly my mother. My mother, she just passed away about a month ago, was probably one of the most accomplished women that I've ever met. She was a refugee herself to the United States from Hungary, but there was nothing she couldn't do, and I don't say that lightly. She went to the l'école, no, that was me. See, no separation. She went to music and art in New York, which is a public school, but in order to get in, you've got to have certain talents, and she had those. She has a master's and was ABD, all but dissertation, in chemistry from Columbia. She also was involved in teaching teachers on how to teach science. In the 60s, I was actually often her guinea pig. She would, try these various teaching programs. She also was an interior designer, and then later on in life, she opened up an art gallery in Southampton, New York, which became a very successful art gallery. And there was, my mother, I would go to sleep at night, and my mother was always up. And whether she'd be up making an art, she designed our homes, she designed people's homes, she did home, there's just nothing she couldn't do. But, it's funny when you say it as a woman, because I never thought about whether or not gender had any influence on what I could do. So, I don't look at myself that way. I just look at this as what I do, but I don't think about it, as far as gender.
Well, I see a lot of your mother in you when you talk, because you're a very successful person, and I'm just can't believe how much you've accomplished so far in your life. So thank you.
Well, jack of all trades, master of nothing is more what it seems like. And it's interesting when you ask me about people that influenced me. I mean, growing up, I was horse crazy. That was my passion. I was at the barn every day of my life until I went to college, and actually even took my horse to college. Used to get up. I did. Oh, and it was a fluke, because I wrote my essays for college on riding, because that was really the most important thing to me in my life. And the admissions director had a horse. I mean, it wasn't a horse school by any means. It was in the middle of Worcester, Massachusetts, which, if you've ever been there, is a kind of old mill town, if you will. But they said, oh, there's a barn about a half an hour away. And I used to go at 5:30 in the morning before classes and clean stalls, and so I could get a reduced rate, and that's how I was able to have her up there.
Was that Western or dressage?
English.
English,
so yeah.
English. Well, does Dougal like horses too?
I've never seen anything Dougal doesn't like, to be honest. I still miss it every day of my life. And I just don't have the time. But I'm going to slow down one day, and when I do, the first place I will head back will be the barn, or at least one of that or dance.
You don't have a horse now, then?
I don't. And there was actually a few years ago, well now I was 40, so actually 11 years ago, I went to a barn here and said, I'm just gonna, take a few lessons. And they said, would you like to keep riding? I'm small enough that they had some ponies that needed training. I never grew tall. So, and the biggest problem is I travel so much for work. And I'm typically in my office most nights and weekends, and I just need to find that time.
From what I understand, there's a tremendous bond between a horse and the owner. From what I watched, I think there was a movie there, people trained wild mustangs in 100 days. I don't know if you saw that movie.
Horse whisperers and all of that.
At first, sometimes the relationship seemed like they hated the horse. It was difficult, but I was amazed, but every single trainer who took the project on was bonded with their horse and loved them at the end. So there is some kind of amazing bond with animals, or especially horses I've seen people have.
You know what, there's no question, and I know that people say all the high school angst that every girl in high school goes through. I mean, I think that my horse was just my outlet, and there's no question that there's a bond, and I agree with you with animals. I feel it with my good buddy here, Dougal.
And horses, my daughter took riding, and I used to wait in the barn. They have pets too. Apparently, they like to have little
we
cats
had a goat. Oh, we had a
goats. Seabiscuit had 3 or 5 pets he kept in his stall. So.
It's actually very calming for a lot of horses that are, cribbers, which means they're chewing on stalls, and they'll have a goat in the stall, and there's no question.
Oh, that's amazing.
Smarter than people give them credit for. No question about that.
Well, you know what? Besides having all these talents, you are a tremendous dancer. Can you tell us about the dance you do? What kind?
I don't know that I would say I'm a tremendous dancer, but I love dance. As a matter of fact, as I said to you, if I wasn't here today, I would be in dance class right now. The dance that I love more than anything in the world is African dance, West Africa, Guinea, Mali, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire. It's done to live music, live drumming, and it absolutely for me, it fills my soul. There's a piece that when I hear that, there's nothing I'd rather be doing.
So I picture almost Goldie Hawn kind of dancing when she was in that movie, The House Sitter. So is it that intense? That much level of, she's in very good shape. I haven't seen her lately, but I was always amazed at the way she kept in shape, like as you do. So is it that intense?
Well, the dances are big movements. It's big. There's no question that it's physically strenuous. But again, it depends on different parts of even Africa, because Congolese dance is more is a smaller movement in the hip as opposed to Senegal or Guinea, which is a bigger movement. Or then you've got Afro-Caribbean or Haitian, which again are more centered. Here, there's no question that it's strenuous.
I guess I'm asking that because would an average person who's never danced be able
Absolutely.
to go to a class?
And they should. And there's classes in Burlington. Like I said, there's one this morning, and they're Mondays and Wednesdays at Memorial Auditorium. J. Kalu, which is a wonderful dance company here in Burlington. We have drummers from the National Ballet of Guinea, National Ballet of Mali, and it's really wonderful. And everyone can do it. It's actually done in lines.
Oh, nice.
So, you could have 3 people in a line, and, if there are people who are not as accomplished or are newer, the teacher will give easier steps. So, and different people's of different,
fun.
Yes, come and join us. Different capabilities can do it.
I will.
So welcoming. And I have yet to meet anyone who doesn't hear the music and feel this.
And the live energy.
And the live energy. It's the hour and a half a day when I do it that I feel like everything else leaves my body and I can let the music in. And as a matter of fact, the days that I don't dance well, when I can't get work out of my mind, I can't let the music in, and then I don't dance well.
I don't know if
Is that every day, an hour and a half?
Monday, Wednesdays, and then Saturday is a 2-hour class.
3 days a week.
3 days a week.
Is that the 3rd floor of the auditorium?
It is.
There's a wonderful documentary that I haven't seen yet, but I saw the trailer. It's called War Dance, and it was set in Africa, and it's about these countries that have a high level of war, but they have competitions where the children go to sing and dance. And it was very invigorating. And I think what you're describing is the vibrancy and the willingness of the people to overcome any odds or obstacles. It's contagious almost when you see this.
I would love to see it, and there's no question. I mean, when you think about how difficult life can be in a place like Conakry, Guinea, or anywhere else, and yet this is something that makes them whole. This is something that, regardless, it's a means of celebration, it's a means of communication, it's a means of keeping a community together. It's so important. You know, I think everybody should have dance and music in their life somewhere.
Well, Terry, we gotta go.
Oh, seriously, come on down.
Yes,
Actually,
I would love to.
You know, dance is now right around the corner from here. On Saturdays, it's at the Tao Woodworking Studio. So it's literally around the...
On Flint Avenue.
Yeah, right here. So
Oh, beautiful.
you can walk right from the studio and go dance.
But you were talking about your mother's work, and then you chose to go into law. So that seems like going in a different direction. How did you happen to choose law?
It's actually kind of by accident. I thought my entire life that I would be a physician, and actually thought I'd be a psychiatrist. And that's actually the reason that I went to Clark University. It's the one school in the United States where Freud was there and they taught, and it was the big psychological convention and whatever it was, and when he was alive. And it has a very strenuous psych program, undergrad, and I did a program at Worcester State facility, which was a very large, I mean, I think in its heyday it had probably about 6,000 inmates, or patients, I should say. And by the time that I was there with deinstitutionalization and from the Kennedy administration, so many of the people that had been at Worcester State were out in the streets, but there were so many homeless and so many people that clearly required medical follow-up. And I ended up, part of one of the papers that I wrote was on the right to take medication and the right to refuse, because I was wondering why, people were there without help and follow-up. And I always had to work at the sciences. I was pre-med, and I did well, but it didn't come naturally to me. I would used to call my mother up from school and say, okay, I've got, I'm in chemistry, I've got my chemistry homework, you've got to help me. And actually my daughter used to do the same until just recently. But writing always came easily to me. And after writing on this, I thought, I think maybe I'm better suited for law than I am for medicine. I took a year off and then went to law school. Freudian slip.
Well,
Before I went to law school, I thought I was interested in psychology too. I actually got all the prerequisites to get into a graduate program in psychology, 24 credits. And then somebody told me that if you think people's problems are internal, then you go to psychology. You become a psychologist or a psychiatrist. But if you think people's problems are mainly external, then you go to law school. So I decided that people's problems were mostly external, and I went to law school.
And there you go. What kind of law did you practice?
Well, since I got my first degree in electrical engineering, I went to work for Wyatt Gerber Burke and Beatty in Manhattan, and we were doing intellectual property. But I was living in Nyack, which was 20 miles north, and it was about a 2-hour commute during the rush hour. So 2 hours in, 2 hours back, and I thought that was just too much. And to move into the city, the housing is very expensive. And so I decided I quit and I moved up to Albany, New York. And then I did private practice there.
Nice. I think it's interesting. I think having a science background benefits anyone, because I think it's a way of thinking that no matter what you do with it, and that's I feel very strongly in education that liberal arts to a large degree is very important for those reasons.
And it seems like you've merged the two with your creativity and your studies. I mean, somehow it's fused in you. It just can complement. One complements the other.
In many, because at my firm, we handle different kinds of immigration cases, and we represent a lot of companies, engineering companies, and when you when you have to work to get someone here, to get them a visa, you're going to describe what the company does and why they need them. And, part of the letters that we write are explaining some of what it is the company's doing, what this engineer will be doing for the company, and why clearly I'm not going to be fluent in what it is that they're doing. Having a basic understanding, I can explain to you how the third layer of chocolate gets put on a Slim Fast bar so that it doesn't melt the layers underneath, and why that's a specialized knowledge position so that someone can come here and run one of those machines.
It's true. I've always been fascinated, but I read that mathematically you can tie music together because there's a little bit of space between each note that's mathematically an equation. So there is a complementary between the two, I believe, but it's way beyond my knowledge.
Well,
but
I love music. I love dance. Going to see music. Unfortunately, I think I sing in the key of Q, and am not accomplished that way. It's one talent I don't have.
Look at Bob Dylan. They told him to stop singing
at
one point.
Good point.
And we're glad he didn't. So.
When you were talking about your experience at the L'École Française in New York, it brought to mind that here in Vermont, for a long time, half the day was in French for everybody. So Vermont was really a neighbor to Quebec, the French speaking. But now that's been eliminated. What do you think about that?
I wish to heck that weren't the case, because my daughter, who is a senior at McGill this year, was one of the last that she didn't have half the day in French, but she had French starting in kindergarten and straight up through grammar school, and then she continued in high school, and she's continued on with her languages, and it absolutely made a difference. I think for a child to learn a language at that early age makes such a difference in their comfort level. Even when you and I were talking earlier about a comfort level in speaking a foreign language, that barrier goes away if you've been doing that, even if you're not fluent, but it's something that you're accustomed to. I think that is a tragedy. I just think that whatever language, they say, today everyone should learn, whatever, some language, and certainly it's the way of the world. The world is flat. It's a shame, and I wish it were brought back. And I can see from my son, who did not get that benefit, and I think it was harder for him. I don't think he started French until the 5th grade.
Yeah, I agree. I think Vermont's so close to Quebec, and it's great to start when you're young. I started in high school, and on m'a dit que je parle avec un accent très fort américain. Je vais perdre mon accent jamais, je crois. So if I started earlier, I maybe would have been able to speak with a...
Absolument. Parce que quand je parle français, il n'y a personne qui dit je parle avec sans accent. And what I just said is, I don't know that if it's true, but people will say that I don't speak with an American accent, and it's because I think I started at 3.
Oh, you have a beautiful accent, and one thing that mesmerizes me if someone speaks French with the type you just spoke, it's the most beautiful language I've ever heard. Even when a man speaks, it's mesmerizing.
And I always think of I'm old enough to remember the Addams Family, and I always remember, I love it when you speak French,
yes.
Tish.
Oh, that's a good reason to learn French. I do, I remember that.
Right?
You went to Hofstra Law School.
I did.
And after you graduated law school, you took the bar exam in New York?
I took the bar exam in New York, and actually I've been fortunate enough to take 3 bar exams, not because I didn't pass one, but we moved around after, in 1992, it's funny how these timelines go away. We had moved to, my husband was transferred, we went to South Carolina, and then we went to Oregon, and we came back here, and we kept moving to states at the time that didn't have reciprocity. So I have taken several bar exams.
Did you take the Vermont bar?
I did, and that was there's a long story behind that. I shouldn't have had to, but it's a long, complicated story. And
no, Vermont does have reciprocity.
They do.
Theoretically.
They do. And it's, like I said, it was just a strange circumstance, and I was being waved in, and I was admitted what's called pro hac vice on about 30 cases that we were trying, and at that point I just said, you know what, let me just take the bar exam so we don't need to deal with this, and so I sat for the Vermont bar as well.
Why couldn't you just get waived in?
At the time when we'd moved around, they had said that I was practicing part-time and that I wasn't entitled to waive in had I practiced part-time, which actually wasn't necessarily the case, but it became it had nothing to do with me. It was between the Board of Bar Examiners and my firm at the time, and I just stepped out of it and said, look, you know what, I'll just take the bar exam. I was out of school for, wow, when did I take the 98? So I was probably, or 90, I think it was 98. I'd probably been out of law school about 10 or more years. So, you know, at that point, you know, you go into it with a different headset, you know, and it was not no one wants to take the bar exam, much as no one wants to have a root canal.
Much like Leonardo DiCaprio in that movie Catch Me If You Can. I'm a lawyer.
Right, but it was just, it seemed simpler at the time.
Yeah.
And
They say it's much harder after you've been out of school for a while because all the little details aren't fresh in your mind.
there's no, you know, the bar exam is really a rote memorization exam. You know, I think law school teaches you how to think, but it doesn't teach you to be a lawyer. You know, you get that from practice, and there's no question, especially with the bar exam, which is so comprehensive, and for many people like myself who become specialized, you know, I never think about property laws. You know, as a matter of fact, my father used to say, well, why the heck can't you close on my house? And I said, well, Dad, I'm not a real estate lawyer. And he goes, but you're a lawyer. And you know, my answer was, well, you don't go to a proctologist to deliver a child, you go to an obstetrician, you know? But yes, it's harder in that regard, but if you take the study tools and you memorize what you need to memorize, but I think internally for me there was a difference in that I knew there were certain topics I would never know, and there'd be 5 questions, and I didn't, you know, I didn't worry about them. I said, I'm not going to even worry about that, you know. So it was just having to rememorize things I hadn't thought about in years.
Did you do the bar review course before?
I did.
You did.
I did.
Do you have an eidetic or contextual memory?
No,
Oh my goodness, you don't.
I absolutely do not.
Well, I have a neighbor who wants to go back and take the LSAT, so I'm excited for her, but I think I'm going to have to help her. I hope I'm going to be able to help her study so I can learn something too.
Vermont has the internship program too, that after you come in, you have to do a 6-month internship, is it?
Right.
You had to do that?
I was working for a firm, so I don't remember because it was actually a while ago. It was, I think it was 95. Must have been 1995. 96. I don't remember, but I was already working clerking, so I guess I must have done that too. You know, you signed the papers, and I was clerking at the firm.
When you got out of law school, you started out with a firm in New York City, right?
Actually, the firm I started out with had offices in New York City, had offices in Chicago. The one I worked in is actually their Long Island office at the time was about 400 attorneys at that particular firm.
What was the name of the firm?
Wilson, Powell, Dunn and By. It's got different names. Rifkin Radler, Dunn and By. I think it was actually Birch By, you know, the Senate was part of that. And it was a firm that was known primarily, and it's still in existence, for doing a lot of product liability litigation, as well as I think they do, you know, attorney malpractice. I mean, it's a defense firm.
Uh-huh.
And I was interested in product liability because, again, I had a science background, and so those are the kinds of cases I started doing.
How long were you with them?
I was a summer associate there, and then I want to say 2 years, and then I went to Wall Street. I went to a firm on Wall Street where I was doing corporate litigation, so I was still in litigation. I stayed on Wall Street for a little bit, and then I moved to a boutique litigation firm, also in New York. And then we moved out of New York, and I moved up, we moved to South Carolina, Portland, Oregon, back to New York, and then up here.
But you found Burlington's probably one of the most beautiful places you've lived, because it says here that your husband's firm was Nordica.
Correct.
He's relocated, and you both decided to stay here. What was the deciding factor?
Well, we both had loved Vermont. His family's had a house in Sugarbush area in Warren since I think Sugarbush opened up, so 1966. And so we used to come up here. And you know, there's something about Vermont. I still feel it, and I travel all the time. And when I'm in the plane and I'm looking and I see Lake Champlain and I see what we have, it's this internal feeling. I can't imagine a more wonderful place to live. I wish our winters were a little shorter.
I think we all do.
But other than that, I wouldn't trade it for the world. And we really, you know, we were so excited to get up here. And then when his company transferred back out, we said, that's it, we're not going to go.
Speaks highly for Vermont. But I find when I leave Vermont, I miss the water, I miss the lake. So if I travel, I really do miss that body of water that's next to me. And I was surprised. I just would have to live near water if I moved again, but not the ocean.
And see, I grew up on the, you know, where my parents are is out on the, you know, the very end of Long Island. Yeah. So that, you know, I still, when I think about water, in my mind, I conjure up the smell of salt.
I smell salt, though. When I go down to the lake, I guess thousands of years ago or whatever, it was kind of a saltwater lake, or it was part of the sea.
Right.
So some mornings I do smell salt, sea salt.
Maybe
it's my imagination.
I can ask my son is actually, his summer job is a Lake Champlain steward.
Oh,
and
nice.
he just graduated from CVU high school in Heinsberg, and they have to do a senior project, or a grad challenge it's called, and he did his on invasive species in Lake Champlain. And then afterwards, he's got a job there, and so his whole job this summer has been as a Lake Champlain steward.
How does he like that?
He loves it.
He does?
He loves it. Although Zach, if you're listening to this, can you take the samples out of the fridge, because I thought they were something for salad.
Well, my daughter went to Burlington High School, and their logo is a seahorse, or not a logo, but their...
That's my totem.
So, and I thought they had said that's because there were seahorse fossils in the ground. So
well,
that they're saltwater creatures.
There must be, because we have those lake fossils, whale fossils in
Yes.
Charlotte. So there are whale fossils in Charlotte, so there's no question that I think at some point.
It was, and that's, therefore it probably does smell a little bit like salt. But on some mornings when it's windy and I go down to the lake with my dogs, there are whitecaps. And to me, it looks just like the ocean, but an ocean that won't send a tsunami at you.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy, because I feel you get both the effect of waves and the effect of a beautiful, clear, calm lake. So it's very addictive.
You know what, I get that. I actually feel that about the mountains, because I think that's something that I didn't grow up with. You know, again, I grew up on the water. You know, even when we were in New York City, we had a house on the water. When my father purchased the property, he couldn't afford to build a house, so we used to go out there and sit on the property, and we would just sit there, and it's on a bluff, and he would plant that bluff every weekend with something called Rosa rugosa, which is a beach rose. It was to prevent erosion, so he'd hoped that he would never have to bulkhead. Yes. And so we used to literally sit on the property. But mountains I did not grow up with. So to me, you know, I often in the mornings take Dougal and we go up Philo before work, which is, nice. You know, it's a nice short hike, and you can do it before work. And I love getting to the top and that vista. I don't belong to a gym, and I say we don't need to in Vermont.
No,
I mean,
true.
We can be out running. We can snowshoe. We can board. We can ride. We can do everything here.
I always say my dogs are my gym,
right?
And my security system, and my psychological people too.
I get that, and I think he's decided to sit on your feet. I'm sorry for that, but it keeps them warm in the winter.
This is Dougal, and he's, per the article in 7 Days, he's your canine system analyst.
Yes.
He's not on screen on TV right now.
Dougal, you want to get up and make yourself seen?
Yeah, honey. He can actually come up on my lap if you want.
Oh, he would.
Oh.
There we go.
Hey, Dougal.
Everybody says, how does he see? And I say, I'm his seeing eye person. Actually, the breed, they have the hair over their eyes because, he's called a bearded collie, which collie just means sheepdog. It's a Scottish breed, but they were in an area of low-lying brush and dirt and sand, so it was to keep the the stuff out of his eyes, and I do occasionally pull it up in a ponytail, but he spends the whole time putting it back down.
This breed is famous from the movie with Kurt Russell. I can't remember the name.
The shaggy dog.
The shaggy dog.
That's right.
It's the same kind.
It absolutely is. It's a one. You know what?
beautiful.
They are temperament. You cannot beat them. You don't see many of them because you do have to have a commitment to the coat.
Oh, his fur is so soft.
It's but if you do, I brush him at least twice a week. I've got a grooming table. Otherwise, he'd be dreadlocked.
He looks like a Muppet. He doesn't look like he's a dog. He looks like he's a stuffed animal, but he's beautiful.
Thank you.
And I think in the article, you mentioned that he's there to kind of greet your clients sometimes when they come in.
And
Yeah, I first saw him on your website, and on your website it says he works in your office, right?
That's right. He is there, and it really does. A lot of people come to my office, and immigration is stressful for people. It really is. It's an anvil. Knowing that you're not. I mean, me, I'm a Type A personality. I like closure. I need. I don't like things to be in limbo. And when you're an immigrant in the United States and you don't have, you recognize that at any point you may not be able to stay. And that hangs over people's heads like an anvil. And a lot of times people come to me and they're upset, and it's kind of, having Dougal around often helps people. I will say there are certain cultures that are not comfortable with him because there are certain places where, dogs are not pets mostly, they're mongrel. And they're, a lot of wild dogs, and so people, some people are uncomfortable, and then we put him in one of our spare offices and he howls a bit, but he gets over it.
We experienced that in Arizona when my daughter and I were in a taxi cab, and she had a pup, the dog that she was bringing back with her. And the taxi cab driver was a man, very fit man, but he was from another culture, and he was putting his hood up. And my daughter said, he doesn't like the dog. And I was like, really? But he seemed almost like, keep it away from me. So I was laughing. I had no idea why. The dog was really upsetting him, but I could see that there was some aversion to dogs in his culture.
There's no question. Not everyone, certainly not every, country has the means. People don't have the means or facilities to take care of pets. And, I was in Bucharest last year, and there were dogs everywhere throughout the streets. And, most of them were wild dogs.
I was telling Terry, I either saw or read that in Russia, some of the wild dogs have learned to ride the subway system in the winter.
Really?
They know to get on and off stops, and they ride with the other passengers, and they're just accepted as normal subway riders.
And I wonder if they get a little pass around their collar.
But the interesting is they don't read signs, but they know where their stops are to get off. They do it every day, or in the winter when they need to transport themselves to other locations. It's just fascinating.
How interesting. Dougal, you think you could do that? Probably not.
His hair would get in the way of his eyes.
That's right. You wouldn't be able to read the signs.
But wild dogs can be dangerous. In Bucharest, in Romania, is it safe to walk with them?
I did not feel threatened, and I tend not to feel uncomfortable around animals, but I know that some of my colleagues, when we were out late at night, were a little taken aback, a little bit nervous. I did not feel that, but
being descended from wolves, they learned to interact with humans in a way that was acceptable, I think. So I thought larger dogs have that instinct. They probably won't go up and bite you if you're not bothering them. They just
If they get hungry, what are they?
It's true. There's plenty of food in the bins everywhere in all these countries. People throw things away, and I don't know. I've never experienced it, but I always want to defend dogs. So
I know.
I don't think they.
But you have 4 of your own.
Dougal's predecessor was from Canada, and I had a whole spoof, and I think it's still on the website, about their immigration history, which is kind of fun.
Goodness.
But Leslie, you said that after you moved to Vermont, 6 months later, your husband's company got moved down to New Jersey, but you both decided to stay here. I think it would be interesting for people that typically, historically, the husband's career has been the center, and the wife often moved for his career. But now, after that transition, your career is obviously or maybe it has always been, the more important one. How do you handle that?
And it's interesting, it wasn't the more important one, so to speak, but it was, I had a job. You know, as soon as I came here and I applied for jobs, I found one very quickly. And so at that time, when his position went away, I had one. So and I had just, you know, I think I hadn't even taken the bar at that time, but I knew that I would. And so we made that decision, and he was more flexible, I guess, or, you know, in what he could do. And it took him a while actually to find something else, and he transitioned to a different career actually. He went into the drug industry, legal, not, he worked for Merck. Well, and that used to be the joke. I said, oh, my husband sells drugs and I take everything over the border. It's a match made in heaven.
That's great.
No, he went to work for Merck. And so, you know, we were lucky that he was able to find that.
Did you have young children at the time?
We did.
How did you handle the child care?
That's actually very interesting. You know, when you said Heinz, when you said Heinz, we mentioned Heinsberg, and I can never think about Heinsberg except as one of my au pairs, which is what we ended up doing, who called me at one point, and she was horribly lost in the car. And I said, it's okay, just find a sign, tell us where you are, and we'll get you back here. And she couldn't find anything, and she finds, and she goes, I know where I am, it's not a problem, I'm in Heinsberg. I'm like, where? I'm in Heinsberg. And so we never refer to Heinsberg in my house as anything but Heinsberg. But it was interesting because we did need childcare. My husband was traveling for Merck. I mean, he was traveling quite a bit, and when we first came up also, before his position changed, he traveled quite a bit. And I was trying cases, and I might have a trial in Bennington, and I'd have to be there at 8. And there's no daycare that would open at 8, or, you know, I mean, at 5 o'clock in the morning I'd have to leave. So we tried to find some nannies locally. It was actually hard. We actually had one lovely woman. Her husband owned a farm in Panton, and she used to come to our house, and then they decided to stay in Panton, and I used to she'd pick up the kids, and I'd have to go to Panton all the way after work. I mean, it was quite a long trip. In realizing we needed the flexibility, we used the au pair program. I was not an immigration attorney at the time. I didn't know about the program, but it's funny, it all comes back in the end, but we had au pairs from several countries. And we only had, you know, au pairs because if I was traveling or I wasn't there, I wanted someone to take care of the kids. I did not want people taking care of my kids if I was home. So, I mean, the au pairs tend to like our house because we'd say, okay, we're home, you know, go do what you want. You know, we don't need you if we're home. So, but we use the au pair program.
Oh, I love the show with the British nannies who come in, and I remember that they're so different in the way they raise children, and British children are like little adults whenever I talk to them. It's such a different way of treating children that I find it kind of refreshing and interesting. Maybe they don't treat children as keeping them so young emotionally and mentally as we do here in America.
Well, and we didn't have, you know, the au pairs tend to be young, you know, they're usually, I think they have to be under 26. Majority of them are in the realm of 18 to probably 23. So we had au pairs from Latvia, Estonia, France, South Africa.
And they must have loved it here because it was like coming to like a beautiful country.
Yes and no. Depends on what they wanted, because there's people, you know, they see 90210. Or, you know, there's people that really, they want to come to the United States for the New York experience.
Yes.
So we were very careful to let the au pairs know that we were not living in that environment, and when they'd be here it was a rural, you know, because, and people put in where they want, you know, so typically those that did come to us were happier with a smaller rural type environment.
That was one of the most appealing things to me is about Vermont once I got older, was the pace of life here. And whenever I have people coming from other locations, they're like, what's wrong with this place? They're very high octane kind of energy, and I'm like, well, it's Vermont. You know, I'm like, why isn't he just serving us? Why isn't he helping us? I said, it's Vermont. And so I forgot the difference. And so I find that being here, one of the things I cannot adapt to is a fast-paced society. If I go visit someplace else now, I go, oh, this is a little bit stressful. But
And that's
again,
not just New York you're talking about, that's Florida, right? Your future son-in-law came up from Florida?
yes, but I'm so glad you shared that story about the au pair, because my daughter's going to be an air traffic controller in January, hopefully. And she's going to have a baby, and so I was wondering, you know, what they were going to do. So I'm going to suggest that to them.
Well, I mean, it's, you know, the one thing is you do have to have someone live in your house, so you have to be prepared for that. It's, you know, it can be a wonderful experience when it works out well. My kids were actually the ring bearer and flower girls in one of their weddings. She later married. One we still keep in touch with. She's in Iceland, and one when I didn't get to see her when I was in Romania last year, but you know she's in Romania, and we were Facebooking, and you know it can be a really nice experience. It really can.
And I had that experience with my friend from Panama. When I got friendly with her, I was adopted into their whole family. And I had never experienced that before. I just became a part of the family.
Nice.
So I always wondered, was that because of the culture? But I always thought maybe the Panamanian culture was similar to the French culture of my mother's culture.
Right.
But
I do. I was just in Panama last year.
Oh, you were?
But I'm trying to think. I don't. You know, again, I do travel a lot for work, and oftentimes, you know, although I had to go see the Panama Canal. You can't be there and not do that. But a lot of times, I don't get to see as much as I would like because I'm in and out.
Did you go on the canopy? They told me that's beautiful. It's a canopy ride above the jungle.
I didn't do that in Panama, but I've done it in, you know,
In
Costa Rica and other countries down there. It is really, it's fun, really fun.
That's what my friend tells me, that if you buy a pass to go into a club, it's good for 5 clubs. So you can go dancing in 5 clubs, not just one.
And I think that was true. I don't remember, but.
Flying so much, you probably recognize the antennas on the airport control tower behind us here. We were trying to figure out earlier what all those antennas are for. Do you know?
You know, I have no idea.
I would think they would just need one antenna to communicate with the airplanes.
Terry, that's in case the plane hits one and breaks one off. So we've got some more left over.
Or they have spares. Maybe that's it.
No, I'm just kidding. I don't know.
I do know that site. Again, I know that tower. I pass it frequently.
But what's nice is they have integrated bilingual language into the airport in French and English.
Well, I mean, our
Signage.
airport is pretty. I mean, it is. I want to say, you can't be there and not see Canadians because it's cheaper. You know, I used to fly out of Dorval, out of Canada, a lot, but it's much more expensive. And so people come down here and fly out through Burlington. You know, it's easier, it's cheaper. I still fly out of Montreal for international flights a lot of times because it's easier and I can go direct. You know, for example, I've got to go to India in November, and it was, you know, the only way for me to do it without spending a day in the airport in DC or New York was to fly from Montreal.
And I think it's possible you can just hop on the bus and get to the airport. Is that true? There's a bus that goes up to Canada from downtown Burlington.
Oh, my daughter, you know, my daughter's a
Yes.
student at McGill, and she does take that bus. I don't know that it goes to the airport.
Possibly.
So,
But for you, it's probably easier to fly from Burlington Airport to Montreal. And
I drive.
Oh, you drive?
It's, you know, it's only an hour and 20 minutes. I mean, it's really not far. I don't think of it as, and you know, international flights leave late at night. You know, they're usually 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So, you know, I'll leave at 1 o'clock in the morning, go 1 o'clock in the afternoon, have some lunch, see my daughter, or, you know, do something, and then go to the airport.
Yeah.
And you're right, about 40% of the traffic coming through our airport is from Canada, is
Right.
what the statistics are in their quarterly, their newsletter that they put out.
It's amazing. Well, now there's Skinny Pancake. You know, it used to be there was a little restaurant one flight up, and you know, even getting coffee there in the morning, it didn't open till 5:30, and now Skinny Pancake has places in the airport, which is lovely.
I know, I think that we should have like a shuttle while you're waiting in the airport. You get shuttled downtown to the business district and then back out to the airport, but.
Well, it's easy enough to do, actually. So, you know, a lot of my clients, you know, I've got clients that come in and we do things here and then they fly in and out of Burlington. And, you know, I mean, it's just a cab ride. I mean, it's $10. It's easy and there's no traffic. It's not like having to deal with another airport where you have to get there 3 hours in advance because of security and traffic and lines.
I love that about
I
the
know.
airport. It's so tiny.
We're spoiled. We're definitely spoiled.
We were talking about the au pairs. There's an immigration issue there for the au pairs, right? if someone in France, a young woman in France wants to come to the United States, she can come in as an au pair. But is it hard to get the visa?
It's interesting, the au pair program is it's under the ambit of what's called cultural exchange visitors, of which our medical residents are under the umbrella of what's called the J1 program. And it's probably one of the easier ways for younger, people, I was about to say women, but it's not, even though the program really mostly consists of women, it's not limited to women. To come here, they come through an agency. In other words, if you said to me, oh, I want to hire a young woman as my au pair, you would not be able to say, oh, okay, I'm going to hire Jenna. This is Jenna, and she's going to, she goes to apply for a visa as an au pair. It doesn't work that way. They go through, it's a program, and so they've got to go through an agency that's authorized and accredited to do these exchanges. But it's not that difficult, because the American family really has no part in that process. It's between the agency and the au pair themselves. So
Is that an American agency that does it, or a French agency?
No, typically it's an American agency here that does it.
Do they get to stay as long as they want, or is it a limit?
No, it used to be a one-year program, and since we were in the program, it was extended to you can extend it up to 2. So, but it's a limit, and it's a limit on the age, and there has to be an English component. They're supposed to be proficient in English. That is often not the case, but that's okay. So there's certain requirements, but the host family really doesn't have any part of that process that they're going to use to get the visa.
I always like to travel. I travel in 30 countries, and, but it's easier to travel, under the tourist visa in Europe than it is to get a resident or a work visa. So I always use it's 3 months in one country. That's the limit on the tourist visa. And then I move to another country.
Right, it's actually called a visa waiver program, and we have it too for countries for which there's not a lot of fraud. You don't need to get a visa. You can visit, it's reciprocity, and we have it with certain countries. They have it in France, England, and for those countries that there's not a high incident of fraud or people staying where they're not supposed to, you've got that ability to go visit a country, for up to 90 days without having to go through the visa rigmarole. So, and there's no question, it's easier to do it as a, tourist for pleasure. When you start getting into work requirements, it's a much more difficult process.
What is one of your favorite countries that you've visited? And that question for you too, Terry. Both of you, maybe it's the same country.
Well, for me, it was France, I guess, and Sweden. Since I started in France, I was a student. That was the only time I actually applied for the student visa, it's because I was going to be there for more than 3 months. And then after I became fluent in French, I started out in Sweden. Actually, it was sort of political. I was in France during the Mitterrand administration, and because being a socialist, and then after he lost the election, the Socialist Party was in control in Sweden, so I moved up to Sweden and became fluent in Swedish. So those are my 2 favorite countries. Austria is very pretty. I studied law in Austria, and that was
nice. My family has roots in Austria also. It's funny, I stumbled on that question because I like different countries for different things. I have a special place in my heart for Hungary. My mother was born there, and my son and I visited last year. Again, for different, there's certain countries that I like to go to for relaxation and beach. I love Costa Rica. I love Jamaica, believe it or not. I have to tell you that last year I was in Poland, and I was in Krakow, and Warsaw. Krakow is a remarkable city. It was, I would love to go back. It's a medieval city. It was just, I didn't know what to expect. So,
What is a medieval city?
In other words, a lot of, it was built during, the medieval times, and, it's not reconstruction, much of it is the way it was then, and it was just really phenomenal, and it was just warm, and the food was, I had a wonderful time there.
That That must be amazing to see something that's actually, because when I went to France, I kept saying to my daughter, look, this building is the original church, or the original building, and she wasn't impressed. But I could see that the structure was, you know, the original building from when it was constructed, and I just thought that was amazing. And the streets were so narrow. In Rouen, I said, look how narrow these streets are. I said, I think only horses went down these streets. And so it was just a wonderful experience because, you know, you realize how young our country is when you go to another continent or culture. And I've only been to France, and I was kind of afraid to leave our country.
Really?
That's why I wanted to ask you that question, because I think a lot of people are intimidated by the fact of leaving the U.S. to go visit another country.
I've never felt that. I love the, you know, I love seeing a different culture. I also agree with you. I think because we are such a young country, I am also, when I see these old buildings, and to me it is, I do the same thing. I touch it and think, oh my God,
Yeah.
you know, this has been here for, you know, 500 years. I think where I had that experience that was most amazing to me was I was in Crete, I think 3 years ago, and we hiked one of the, actually in Crete, unbeknownst to most people, is the longest gorge in Europe. And what was absolutely phenomenal is that you would go through, and there were ruins. And it wasn't, you know, a lot of times today everything is preserved and it's a museum. And, you know, here we were walking amongst, you know, things from BC, and you know, they were just there. And, you know, there'd be a little sign. And, you know, it wasn't this whole tourist, you know, I really, it had a phenomenal impact. And some of the villages that we went to up in the mountains in Crete were as they, you know, still were, and you'd see the people in the garb. And we went to a town called Hanya, and also, you know, just so old. And one of the oldest temples in Europe is there from the 1500s, and it just was phenomenal. So I feel that that never ceases to amaze me.
The energy is different when you watch it on TV, but when you actually stand in it or in front of it, the energy is so different. It can't compare.
And some the ghosts, you know, it's I feel like they're, you know, you can just feel and wonder. And I actually love historical fiction.
Oh, I
so,
do too.
you know, that I always kind of imagine that.
Did you do any of the law school programs?
You know, I did not.
I did one in Poland with the University of San Diego. It's a summer program that we studied in 1987. We studied in Warsaw, at the University of Warsaw, and then we took the flight to Moscow and spent a week in Moscow talking with law firms there. And took the train to, at that time, Leningrad, and spent a week there in the program. So the program was a summer, got 2 credits, international law.
How fascinating! That's real. That's
Or 2
really
courses. That was 3 credit courses. That was 6 credits.
What do you think of Warsaw?
Well, I liked it.
I did too.
I remember there was we visited a coal mine, and there was a slide going down into the mine. So you had to get into this like a little hole, and you get onto the slide. You slide down 3 stories, and then it's almost like a cathedral underneath. But it's a leap of faith to get into that because you don't know where you're going.
Yeah. I can. We actually, when we were out outside of Krakow, we went to a salt mine, and it was the same. You know, and it
That
was.
may have been.
It was phenomenal. I mean, it was so interesting. So, I loved Warsaw. I thought it was really interesting, and I had, you know, again, my family, you know, have, my mother's a refugee because of the Holocaust, and so, you know, there was a lot of, you know, I wasn't sure what to expect. I absolutely loved it.
Later, when I was in Sweden studying Swedish, we were on the island. At one point, we were on the island of Thorn outside of Göteborg, and there were students from all over Europe. I was the only American, so everything was either it had to be in Swedish, all the communication. And so I remember there was one woman from Poland there. We got to know each other, so for several years afterwards we wrote back and forth in Swedish. And she was my pen pal. But she lived in Poznan.
Okay.
So I got to know a little bit about more about Poland that way.
And I love Polish food. Oh my God.
I know, I do too. I love their sausage. It's just so interesting the places you two have visited. It's just amazing. It makes me want to travel. The only place I have an interest before I die in seeing is the monasteries in Tibet.
Oh.
I kind of wanted to see these high mountains and these beautiful, serene places. But these other places sound very interesting too.
I'm headed to India, which will be an interesting experience.
My daughter just visited India.
Oh, she
and I
did?
was terrified when she went, and luckily I talked to someone who's married from someone from India who'd been to India, and they described how women are treated and how women should behave, and the mindset of, and her boyfriend is a Sikh. So
Oh,
he's
okay.
not from India, he's a Sikh. It's, I guess, the
Right.
country next to India. But she loved it. She came back and she said, Drew has his own tailor. He has things made to order when he goes there. And she said, I wish I could do that here. I said, but you can. You can go to a tailor. And she just thought it was the greatest thing. So I admit that I've never been to India, but I was a little bit afraid because she was a woman going there.
Sure. And then that's understandable in today's
Yeah.
world, you know, with Americans traveling with all the things that are happening abroad.
But you're so blonde, like she is. Do you dress differently when you go to India, or can you just
I've
walk
never
around?
been. I've
Oh,
never
you've
been.
never
You know,
been there.
and I
Oh.
do. You know, I have certain instructions about where we're going to go, and you know, certainly we'll make sure to follow those. Same thing if you're in the Middle East. You know, I have a good friend in Turkey, and you know, you always need to be, you know, mindful of where you are. I think, you know, it's interesting as Americans. You know, we're such a large country, and we're so insulated. You know, when you're in Europe, people are used to going to, you know, you don't think twice about going to a different country. It's, you know, here it's a little bit different. You know, we don't see other cultures as readily.
But it's enriching to be exposed to other cultures. So
No
it's
question
kind of
about it.
An excitement that's kind of a fearful excitement. That's good.
We're getting back to the issue of immigration law. When you first moved to Burlington, you went to work for another law firm.
Correct.
That wasn't an immigration?
No, I was litigating because that's what I knew how to do.
So how did you, taking the step of opening your own firm and going to a new field of law, that's a big step.
Well, actually, what happened is again through dance, you know, through African dance, they would ask me questions about immigration, and I didn't know anything about it. And I would refer them to another attorney, an attorney here in town, Debbie Volk, who also practices immigration. She's an excellent lawyer, and I went to work for her. And you know, she's the one that opened the door to me, and it was I never felt passion about what I did in the law, ever. And the second I started practicing immigration, it just clicked. And so, you know, I transitioned that way.
So you became passionate about the law after you got into immigration, which you weren't before.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I felt the same thing when I was working in that house. I didn't have a whole lot of passion for it.
You know, I would go to work. It didn't mean anything. But you know, really, when I went to work for Debbie, you know, she opened up that door, and I never looked back. I really feel that it was the first time I really felt passionate. I deal with people's lives. It's interesting. It's actually a very difficult area of law today. The Supreme Court said about 5 years ago that it's become the most complicated of law, even more so than tax, because it's so regulation oriented. But what makes it so difficult is there's so much discretion on the part of the government. So, you know, I can submit 5 petitions for nurses for a hospital. 3 will be approved, and 2 come back with, well, we don't think that this is appropriate. And you know, recently in a meeting that we had, and I'm in DC quite a bit because of liaison work that I do, you know, one of the comments from one of the hires up in the administration said, we recognize the lack of predictability, and that's very hard as a lawyer, because you say, if I was a real estate attorney, I'd say, look, short of the bank not, coming up with the funds, we're going to close on your property on Friday. I can say we can do everything that we're supposed to do. And number one, it could take 3 months, it could take 9 years. And it might happen or it might not happen. And that's a stressful, it makes it a stressful area. But it's also extremely rewarding.
So Leslie, we were talking about your transition from working for another law firm to opening your own practice. But I found that it's so easy to get clients that don't want to pay anything. But to get paying clients, that's not so easy. How did you handle that?
It's funny because I didn't really think about it. I mean, I didn't have any kind of business background, I didn't take business classes in college or at all. For everything for me, has been word of mouth. I don't advertise per se. It's an immigrant community. You do a good job for one person, they tell their friends. Immigration is federal, so my clients are not limited to Vermont. They're all over the country. You have one, company who may speak to an HR person and said, well, we worked with this person, and we like them. I think I would say you'd be hard pressed to find any immigration lawyer that doesn't have a boatload of pro bono cases in their office, pro bono being non-paying clients, where we want to help, and there's so many people that come that are not of means, and so we have a commitment to pro bono in our office, and we always have a number of pro bono cases going. We're just limited by our ability to help the world, but we have a commitment to helping those who can't. So there's never a time in our practice where we don't have pro bono cases going.
In the 7 Days article, it said there's one woman in South America that I guess she was a pro bono case that wanted to pay you with a goat.
Yes. No, that was that's actually one of our favorite stories. I've been so fortunate. When you're an immigration lawyer, you have to know all about your clients, and you get involved in their lives because it's a lot of their circumstance that brings them to what they are, and also what you've done in your life determines your admissibility to the United States. And it's a very comprehensive applications that people make, so you know all about your clients in a way I think that separates you from perhaps other lawyers in other situations. And frequently people are grateful and they bring us gifts. And this was a client that came by, and in the back of their truck was a cashmere goat. And we have about an acre of property, but we're not zoned for livestock. And much as I wanted the goat, I could not keep the goat.
Aww.
So they did take it back, and they named it after me, and they sent me a picture with the name Leslie over the goat's stall, and that's I think if it happened today, I would find a way to keep the damn goat.
The little pygmy goats are so cute.
They are adorable.
They weigh about 75 pounds. So I think they're from Africa.
Yeah, they're so cute.
But when you worked in New York, you were doing products liability, right?
Correct.
In products liability, most of the cases would be contingency fee. The law firm would get 30%.
No, because we're a defense firm.
Oh.
So we represented the manufacturer. So it wasn't contingency. It's not so in other words, they're paid by an insurance company to defend a litigation.
So you never got into the problem of doing
never
contingency?
dealt with it.
Yeah.
Never dealt with the money aspect until I went out on my own.
I look on that sort of like going to Las Vegas. You have to put this enormous amount of money into a client's case if you're getting a 30% contingency, and then maybe you win, maybe you lose, and you don't really know what the client's going to say once they get on the stand and
Right.
testify. So you can't be sure you're going to win.
Right.
And you have to have a lot of capital that you're willing to put at risk if you're going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, again, that was a different element to how we work in our practice, and so that's just not something that really came up.
Yeah. Some of the law firms in Burlington do that. So I first met Dougal on your website, on your webpage, on the internet, and it says on the internet that he works in your law firm. Can you tell us a little bit about his work at the law firm? Is he going to get admitted to the bar, do you think?
To the bark. When he was a puppy, we called him the firm shredder, since he would chew everything, and I didn't need to hire a shredding service. He's our meter and greeter. He tends to put people at ease. Whenever anyone walks in, he's always there if he's not sleeping on his back, but then he sits there and he rolls over and asks people to pet him. And he generally has a nice calming influence, and it helps to make people feel at home.
And he never bites anybody, or he's always good-natured?
I have never seen this dog get aggressive with anybody or thing. I mean, to the point that if he sees another dog that will raise its hackles, he rolls over on his back and is like, "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to hurt you. Leave me alone."
And in petting him, there's not much dog under all that fur. He
No.
must be very skinny.
It's funny because people think, "Oh my God, he's enormous."
No, he's not.
He probably weighs about 58 pounds.
He's like a poodle.
He has the appearance of a much larger dog, but if you see him wet, you'd think, "Oh my goodness, not much to him." But I love the fact that Burlington is a dog-friendly, is a dog-friendly town. It's wonderful, and my office is right by City Hall, so I've got the park, I've got the waterfront, and so it gets me out of the office too. And I leave my office late at night often, and so it's kind of nice to have him by my side. That's the old New Yorker in me is if it's dark and late at night.
Oh, we have a phone call here. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello. I have a question and a comment for the person that's on your show.
Okay, would you like to identify yourself?
I'm Joe Henry Nunes, and I'm from Alamotte.
Okay.
And I just wanted to first, this immigration reform has really shown a lot of what I call the uglier side of the United States. And there is no reverence for what an undocumented person does for our economy, what an undocumented does for us, for our military, what it does for us culturally. And the other thing that I find interesting is that in this equation, there's always the border, but a lot of undocumented immigration is people that overstay their visas.
I'm
and
so glad to
those
hear you
come from
say
all over the
that.
world.
I'm so glad to hear you say these things, because really they are my point of view. And I'll backtrack through what you've said, but so many people fail to recognize that when they talk about undocumented, everybody thinks, oh, these are people who've come through the border, illegally and without papers. But in fact, our immigration system is so broken and so complicated that so many of the people that you see here that they say are undocumented are a result of a failed system. I will give you an example of a gentleman who has been working here on a particular type of visa, and the type of visa that he has is called an H-1B. If you are, you can have it for up to 6 years or perhaps longer. If perchance you are laid off, you are out of status the day that you are laid off. You have a home, your kids are in school, and you don't have a grace period within which to sell your home, to transition your kids to another school. And not only once you lose your status, you are not able, unless in very, very limited circumstances, to change or alter your status to something else once you are out of status. So now you have this person who is tagged on with the group of the 11 million that they call undocumented. And he's really a victim of a broken system. So that message never gets out there. And I am so delighted to hear someone say that. And, with regard to the cultural contributions and the economic contributions that our immigrant or any immigrant population brings to the United States, it is who we are. We are a melting pot. I am the child, of a refugee. I do a lot of speaking in schools, and I usually start my presentations and I say to people, will you raise your hand, any of you who've had some kind of experience with immigration? And it could be their aunt, their friend, a cab driver, and this is what our country was built on, and some of the negativity that's come about as a result of these reforms and these discussions on the Hill, have seen some of the worst. And I mean, take it back 2 years to what happened in Arizona. And if you look at the signs and you look at what they were saying, now take that back to Germany and you'll see the parallel. So I agree with you. Thank you.
Do you also agree with me that the media does an incredible poor job of highlighting the military and children of either that came here illegally and then either were granted amnesty in the 80s or now that basically we do not give the respect to someone that came here illegally, had an American child, and now that American child has stepped up to the plate, has raised up their hand and said, I am going to defend my country because they were born here, while other Americans stay home on their couch playing their PlayStation. We don't even say, these people have given contributions to all segments of our society, and we look at them like they're parasites as far as what comes out of the Republicans. And I just wish someone would be a champion for them and say, no, you are a part of us, and we're going to treat you with respect and dignity.
And you're absolutely right. And if you look at the people who have enrolled and enlisted in the military, there's no question. If you look at the names, and these are the first generation children. And instead, what's so interesting, not only do you hear, not to take it to the military, but there's a horrific term used for what you've just described. And the restrictionists say, oh, they come here to have their anchor babies. I hear that and I absolutely want to cringe. And yet, an anchor baby, just as you said, these are the people who feel that this country has given to them and their parents something that they didn't have elsewhere, and they've given it back through the military. One of the things my association, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, we've got a whole MAP program, which is called the Military Assistant, for families where, we try and help either undocumented spouses or people who are going in, because really this is a population that isn't even taken care of or respected for their contributions. So, and people don't hear about it. You're absolutely right.
Well, I thank you for your comments. I think we're almost on the same page. We're almost like kindred spirits, but it was great hearing your voice, and thank you.
Thank you for calling in.
Thank you, Joe Henry. You said you've been elected president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. You've been working with them for some time. Would you like to tell our audience about that organization?
Sure, and I'm the president-elect. I become president next year. I guess it's a 6-year progression, really. I was elected as secretary, I guess 4 or 5 years ago. It's a whole progression up. I guess at that point you're housebroken enough to appear and speak and do what you need to do. But it's a wonderful association. We're about 13,000 immigration attorneys now. We have different segments. We do a liaison section. One of my strengths or my interests is I'm in DC. I liaise with the government. When we see, I talk to you about consistency or lack of predictability in adjudications and things that we see. So we work with the government. We have an advocacy department that's out on the Hill and has been working tirelessly on the immigration reform debate. We have an education department that we use.
We have another incoming phone call here. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, I'm Ken Wallace. I'd like to congratulate Leslie for her role in the defense of Danilo Lopez. ICE was determined to deport him, but they failed.
And I thank you for that. I spoke with people on that. I supported their. I mean, really, that credit doesn't go to me. That credit goes to our wonderful. I mean, we have migrant advocacy groups in this state who have they were tireless in what they did for Danilo. It is just all I ever did on that was just a little bit of consulting, but we as a state and what was done for this particular individual is a testament of why we live in Vermont, really.
Well, Brendan at the Workers' Center sent out the call when the police had, I think, Danilo Lopez and Antonio Sandoval, and they were going to deport them, but they got enough workers there to at least stop them from getting them until ICE, and that's the only way that they even got to face charges, and then eventually Antonio returned to Mexico, but Danilo is still here.
Yes, he is.
Well, that's a triumph for
it is
for migrant justice.
And I have to tell you, and again, because of where I am with Ayla, and I work, with our members throughout all of our states, Vermont has been phenomenal in its fight and protection. I mean, what its citizens have done, and really not just its citizens, but seriously, its immigration, custom and enforcement, its USCIS. I mean, really, not the people in this community are really everyone came out, and in a way that you don't see elsewhere. And thank goodness.
Well, thank you, and keep up the great work.
One day we'll change the world, right?
Okay.
Trying.
Thank you, Ken. I was a member of an organization here in Burlington for a couple of years ago called Vermont Immigrant Voting Alliance. It was founded by a couple of professors from UVM, and they have been here legally as immigrants, teaching at UVM. And but in Europe, if you're an immigrant, you can vote in the local elections. You can vote for the mayor of Paris. You can vote for the school board. But their children have been in schools here in Burlington for more than 5 years, but they haven't been able to vote for the school board or for the mayor or for the local officials. But historically, 100 years ago, I believe immigrants were allowed to vote here in Burlington. So the goal and the issue has been presented before the city council by the Progressive Party that legal immigrants should be allowed to vote in local elections. How do you feel about that, Leslie?
Well, I get very nervous because one of the grounds of inadmissibility for someone in the United States that would make them not admissible to the United States or removable from the United States is voting in an election in which they are not eligible to vote. And they are not permitted to vote in federal and state elections. And, and so that can ultimately, when you go to apply for naturalization and you go to apply, it asks whether or not you've ever voted. And we have seen people who've become deportable because, for example, they are registered to vote, but the reason they're registered to vote is because they check off that box on the driver's license. Mm-hmm. They don't know that they're not eligible, and we've had people canvass during election times and say, oh, well, of course, go ahead and register to vote, and what they've done is made themselves removable from this country. Mm. So before anyone, and again, in my opinion, is going to approach this population, you've got to make sure you know what you're encouraging, that they know what they're eligible to do and what they're not. It's just like, it will prevent them from getting permanent resident status and or citizenship.
But if the Burlington City Council and the state legislature change the charter to allow legal immigrants to vote in local elections, then that is that they would be voting legally.
I would need to look at that in connection with, because the way our immigration laws, which are federal, it's the same way that prior to DOMA, people could get married in Vermont, but they couldn't get immigration benefits. It's the same way if someone commits a crime, that people say, oh, it's not a big deal, it's a misdemeanor, or I've gotten a deferred sentence, and therefore after 6 months of community service, I no longer have a conviction. For immigration purposes, they still have a conviction. For immigration purposes, until DOMA died, even though they were married in a state that said you could be married, they could not get immigration benefits. So just because a state or a local may say that they're entitled to vote, before I would encourage that, I would look at the interplay between what the federal statute says and permits an immigrant to do. And so to make sure that that population is not in essence violating their immigration status.
That's an important point. I think we'll have to take that into consideration. Another question I have about, I covered the Governor's Conference, and we put it on TV last year. Last August, we had the Governor's Conference at the Hilton Hotel, which is very close to where I live. And I noticed that Governor Shumlin spoke about problems crossing the Canadian border. Vermont business people crossing the border, and Quebec business people crossing the border, they feel that they're harassed and that it's a great ordeal to get across the border, and that hurts our business relationship, because Shumlin pointed out at the Governor's Conference that after a couple of bad experiences, Vermont business people just won't do it. Is there anything that can be done legally? I personally have had experience crossing the border that I was asked, where are you going? With a U.S. passport, I had a Canadian green card. So they wanted to know, well, which country is most important for you? And in order to keep the Canadian green card, I had to say Canada. And suddenly I become almost like an illegal immigrant, and they want to know where I'm going. Is there anything that can be done about that legally?
Actually, and I do a lot of work at the border. I'm up at the border, and there's no question. Clearly, as a result of September 11th, things are much harder. Part of the problems that you see at the border are when they broke apart the INS in 2005 and they created the Department of Homeland Security, they created Customs and Border Protection. And what they did is they combined customs and immigration. And really, you're combining apples and oranges, because customs is a completely different set of laws and regulations, as is immigration. And all of the emphasis has gone to enforcement, not to training in the business areas. And I even think, and again, I work with the people at the border all the time, and I really believe that they'd be the first to tell you is that they don't receive the training that they need in these kinds of business applications, because it's very difficult. And instead, the focus is what we see. It's, we clearly, and I understand that, we don't want to, have someone who's going to harm the country or someone. That doesn't help. And so what we are doing, again, as part of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and we work with headquarters, we work with policy, and we are working with the borders. In other words, I will tell you, at our borders here, for example, at Highgate Springs, which I'm up often, I speak with the port directors and I speak with the adjudicators, and I try and bring some of this knowledge that we're talking about with headquarters, which doesn't get out to the 22,000 people in the field, to say, look, this is what should be happening. You're not hearing it from on high. We're hearing it from on high. We need, again, because I represent a lot of cross-border businesses who, they're 40 miles away, and we have trouble with one getting in. They should be able to come in for a business meeting, and we've got problems. So we are making a concerted effort, my members are around the country, to go to the ports, to start to talk, to educate, because we absolutely need to do that. And it is hard, and it is difficult on business. And there's no question, at the task, they're at the border, they're tasked with, really, they're wearing two hats, enforcer and adjudicator on business issues. Very hard to wear both of those hats. And so it is problematic.
There's an immigration reform bill that has passed the Senate now. And I think in the 7 Days article you were quoted as indicating that was a very important bill. And now it's going into the House of Representatives, and you may be called to testify. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that bill and why it's so important?
Oh, I mean, we so need immigration reform. Part of the thing is people, if you use the A word, and the A word in immigration is amnesty. Everybody, is, oh my God, look what happened. We had an amnesty and nothing's come of it. But, we still have, people here who shouldn't be here, and we haven't fixed the system. We have a broken system. And a horribly broken system. For example, even in giving the example I said before about the person being out of status, that makes no sense. We don't have the pieces that will put all of this into place. We need to overhaul our system to make it work. You're going to hear your restrictionists, and this is part of the problem with one of the things that's in the House, we're not doing anything until that border, we build 5,000 more layers of fence and drones and whatever. First of all, we know that doesn't work. You can build all the borders that you want, but if you don't fix the other people, if you don't find a way to keep families together, those people are going to still try and get over the border. If you're going to, not have a way for your farmers to grow your crops, you can build as much as you want, but you're not going to stem, immigration. And so the idea of an overhaul is really what we need. There's good and bad provisions. Again, I'll be the first one to sit there and tell you, yes, I understand the need for security. Do I think building 5,000 more feet of fence? We have shown that all of the implementations that Obama put in effect for border security have been met. Undocumented workers are down. We've got the figures to show that. What we really need to do is figure out a way to keep families together. If you're a green card holder and you're married to someone who doesn't have a green card, and say you've been engaged for 4 years, you weren't married, you got transferred here, you get a green card, and you want to go home and marry your sweetheart, it's going to be 7 years or 6 years before they get here. It makes no sense. Back in the old days, people, used to come to the United States, make a better life, and then they'd send home and they'd bring their people here. Instead, you come here, you make a better life, and then you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and now your kid's 25, and you left when they were 15, and yet the person that's come here has helped our economy. They've paid taxes. They've enriched, heck, I don't know about you, but I'm sure as heck glad to have Thai food in Burlington and all of these things. And if we don't overhaul this system, we're going to end up with piecemeal. And again, if we don't get immigration reform, you can bet your anything that I'm going to be pushing for piecemeal pieces. But I firmly believe that unless we get something that changes the pieces in the system, all of them, we're not going to fix our problems.
We've heard a lot about the Mexican dreamers. I think there are 10 dreamers that were born here, and then they went back to Mexico, and now they can't get back in to the United States.
That's a really politically charged issue right now. They've gotten back in the U.S., and they're all here. They got back in on what's called credible fear. Credible fear. It was a bold move for them to take. It has certain repercussions that are both good and bad. I mean, the DREAM Act is one of the most wonderful things that we've had. It's amazing to me, and it showed you what was going on in our Senate, that we couldn't get the DREAM. We really don't have the DREAM Act passed. The DREAM Act never passed, but Obama created a provision that is allowing these kids who call America home, who were born and raised here and know no other home, giving them an opportunity here, and hopefully this will become legislation. But we couldn't even get that pact. I mean, the only reason that we have the the dreamers, is because the president went out on a limb and said, look, we need to do something for these kids. When it was up before Congress, we couldn't get it passed. So.
Another issue in the 7 Days article that you indicated was very important was the Defense of Marriage Act and the Supreme Court ruling on that. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Gladly, and I will tell you, I have a huge GLIG team, and this is something for the last 12 years. I have jumped through hoops to keep my same-sex partners together, and in many instances I could not. And I have people who have been together for 20 years that I would have to say, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. And yet I would have people who've known each other 4 months and they're 21 years old, and you get them a green card. I actually was in San Francisco the morning that DOMA, the Supreme Court decision came out, and it is probably one of the most hopeful things that has happened for any immigration lawyer in all the years that I've been practicing. We are finally filing for same-sex couples, which we should have done for years. You know, it might have happened back in 2001 because Senator Leahy we had the Permanent Partners Bill Act, but then September 11th happened, and the last thing we were doing was opening our doors. Instead, we were closing everything off. And as soon as Vermont got civil unions, we got DOMA, which was basically saying we're not going to give rights to same-sex partners. I am now, and I am working with clients that I have known for years, and I mean years. I have people living in Montreal maintaining 2 homes, and I have a practice full of people that I am now going to get for them the immigration benefits they deserve. And I really do think that this is one of the most positive things we have, and I have seen in immigration in the last 6 years. It's really terrific. And I will say the government has gone out of its way to process these cases in a correct fashion. I mean, we've already had some approved. It actually opened up cases that had been denied because there are people who'd been put in proceedings, and their cases, they weren't deported when there was something called prosecutorial discretion. It was kind of an easing up of some of the restrictions, but they were left in limbo. And the government has actually, on its own, sua sponte, opened up some of their cases so that they can have benefits. And I will just tell you how far we've come. This year at our annual conference, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, we have a sister organization called the American Immigration Council. And now we do a fundraiser, and we recognize certain immigrants every year. And this year, it was devoted to gay, lesbian, transgender, and it was just a wonderful affair. And one of the movies, they had a movie by these two men who met back in the 70s, and they'd been together. And there was no way for them to get immigration benefits, but they said the hell with it, and they filed their paperwork, which was, they'd been filing and trying again in the system for all these years. And I'm going to get a copy of the first denial that they received from the government, because it's typewritten, and what it says is, we reject your application because this country does not recognize 2 faggots.
Oh my goodness.
And this is a government document issued in the 1970s or early 80s. And look at where we are now. And can you imagine our government writing such?
No, I couldn't.
And this is
actually.
a government document. And I bring it up because I bring it up for hope, not to criticize the government on that. I can do that, and I do plenty of it. But I really bring it up to show you how far we have come and where I hope we continue to go on that issue.
We have a guest here in the studio that's very interested in this subject. Perhaps would it be all right if we include him? Well, Joe Henry, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
My name is Joe Henry Nunes, and I'm from Isle of Mont, the town of Isle of Mont, and I've lived in Vermont for about 27 years. My partner and I have been married for 12 years, pretty much as soon as civil union was enacted. But I've been a member of the Vermont Air National Guard for about the same time, about 27 years. And so I've had to live under DOMA. And now that it is no longer the law, I still see a lot of challenges for gay people in the military, especially let's use for an example, if a straight serviceman gets stationed in Germany and he falls in love with a German girl and they decide to get married, he goes to the embassy and requests a visa, and it's granted. Now, if a gay serviceman goes to Germany and falls in love with a German guy, and they get married in Germany, which it is legally able to do in Germany, and he goes to the council, I don't think that they're going to give him a visa right away.
Well, you mean the consul? Well, actually, we've been working with the Department of State, and I have a cable was released about 2 weeks ago, as well as FAQs, because we've been working very, very closely with Department of State, and they will be giving visas to same-sex spouses. The only issue is that the marriage has to be valid in the state in which it, or the country in which it occurred. So if someone from the service falls in love with someone of the same sex in a country that recognizes it, that consulate has already received instructions from the higher ups that these visas are to be processed. The bigger issues that I see in that regard, unfortunately, and we've been working with Department of State on this, is there are countries where homosexuality is still against the law. And so if one of my clients or someone falls in love with someone from one of these countries, I am fearful of that same-sex spouse perhaps going into that consulate, where a lot of those consular officers, are part of the community, and there's a lot of homophobia, and there's and one of the things that we've done is we've asking the Department of State, can they third country process? In other words, may that individual in a country where homosexuality might be still against the law get his visa in another country so he's not in danger by actually making that application in a country that doesn't accept that. I mean, these are some of the ancillary issues that I'm concerned about and that we've been concerned about and have been working with. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of education that absolutely needs to be done on this front, as well as when you're doing these kinds of applications, it was much easier, you have to prove the validity of a marriage. Well, it's pretty easy for two people, of opposite sex, they do it. What about the people who are not out to their parents or not in a situation that's going to be, necessarily warm and fuzzy? They may not have the level of proof that the government typically wants because they couldn't be out in the open. So they're not going to have, things that people normally might have. Another issue is what about the people who, have come out later in life? One of my concerns was they're going to say, well, you were married to, someone of the opposite sex before, or, do they understand bisexuality? And these are the issues where we're hoping that there is going to be training on the part of the government. I mean, these are the issues that I've been working on and outlining.
Welcome to my world.
I know. You know what? I know. But at least know that there are people out there on the immigration front who, man, we are fighting for this. We are working on that. We're already getting the names of experts who, if I go in with a same-sex spouse couple and one of the spouses was married previously, you can bet your whatever that I'm going to have materials about what it is to have either come out later, why people haven't come out, what it is to be so that they're not put in a position of trying yet to again defend themselves. So I know it's a hard world, but we've made a huge step, and I can assure you that we are out there trying to hammer it home. So.
Thank you for your great work, and the other thing is our children. Like I have two children that are both mine and my partners, and to leave on a kind of a positive note is even when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was in place, I had to get ID cards for my kids, but then as they were enrolling my children, we had their new birth certificates with both mine and my partners as their parents. And the sergeant that was doing our paperwork was David Wales is his other parent, and then I go, yeah, but I think the thing is most people want to do the right thing. Most people really, if that's been my experience, whether I've went to get a passport for them in Montreal or here, is people want to do the right thing. The thing is I think that a lot of times they're just hampered by laws. And it is so nice to see them finally tumbling and crumbling. It's almost like the Berlin Wall in a lot of ways. It really is. It's just that it's a very smaller, gay people are a small minority in the United States, so we don't get that big fanfare. But this is like our Berlin Wall. The end of DOMA is like the walls coming down. And it is ironic that you were previously talking about immigration reform, that we want to build walls. And I find that's so sad and so un-American. And I also wanted to, if you'll allow me, on your comment about keeping families together and myself being a product of immigration. My father would have never left Portugal if he could have seen a future for us that was equal to our future in the United States. If people would just understand that every time they turned a product around at Walmart, that if it said made in Mexico, we would not be having this debate at all. We would not be having this, because there's enough jobs in agriculture and manufacturing to encompass all of those people. And like my father that came here and could not grasp English, nobody wants to leave their language, their neighborhoods, their families, unless they have to. So I think in a lot of ways, we are responsible for illegal immigration because we benefit for it at the cost of somewhere else. Where instead, if we were a much wiser nation, we would say, why can't all this stuff at dollar stores and Walmart be made in Mexico, El Salvador, Honduras, and all of these countries, so that those people do not have to come here?
Well, and it's an interesting point, and if they don't fix our business immigration, it's going to be, because, just like you say, even on the family front, when you hear the debate about all that's going on, and either whether they have trouble crossing the borders or we don't have enough visas, no, my employers would not go through these hoops that they need to jump through if they didn't need the people, but they are jumping through those hoops, and some of them are saying, the hell with it, you know what? We're going to do it in Guatemala. And yes, it'll benefit Guatemala ultimately if they can get the things in place, and so we can't be myopic, and we really do need to do that. And I always think of it too as the Berlin, I always say, I said, you go to Europe, there's no borders, right? You go from you get the Schengen Agreement, you're going from one country to the next. And we're in our lifetime, we never would have thought that we would see the wall come down. Yet we're building them. It makes no sense. I agree.
Speaking of the Berlin Wall in other countries, Russia now is hosting the Olympics, I think. And they have a new law that foreigners coming in to participate in the Olympics can end up in a Russian jail if they're gay.
Yeah, they're going to have some problems with that, I hope. Let's see how that one's going to play out. That's some pretty ugly consequences. It's mind-boggling.
It seems like a move backwards, I thought.
Well, I think the challenge for us as Americans is Jimmy Carter did a bold move and banned the American our Olympic committee from going to Russia because they had invaded Afghanistan, and it's kind of ironic. But also, I think that if we really truly valued because whether you're gay or you're straight, we're all human beings. And if we really value, you're just talking about that Senegal, perfect example. It is illegal to be a homosexual in Senegal. In Iran, you can be executed for being gay. Saudi Arabia. But my point is I wish we wouldn't look at it purely as Russia and gay people. We need to look is that we need to band together as human beings to say that one person's fight is my fight, and say that this can't be done to anybody. And that to me is proof enough for the president to say, if you do not eliminate this law in the Soviet Union, our athletes will not be participating in your Olympics, because we are part of the human family. It's not just we as Americans, but we as part of the human family, that we value people, and you're not going to treat people this way and us be part of it.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what he does, or to see what kind of political pressure we'll be able to put. I mean, I firmly agree with you. We are one. We are one. And if we don't stand up for each other, and we don't make the efforts to see that people are treated equally and kindly, regardless of their color, regardless of their sexual orientation, then we have learned very little from our collective experiences. So, I'm also on the Vermont Advisory Commission to the Advisory Committee to the Commission of Civil Rights. So, again, this is just part of my thinking, and where I hope the hell we're going to go as a society. Again, I feel hopeful, and I do. I feel more hopeful than I felt in the past because of something like DOMA. And sometimes you've got to have that hope. You've got to have a piece of change. So we'll keep working.
Well, on that note, we've run out of time. So I want to thank you, Joe Henry.
Thank you.
For joining us.
It was nice to meet you.
Nice to
I'm
meet
seriously,
you.
call me if you ever need anything. Oh my God. Hey, whoops. Thank you so much. This
Thank
was
you,
really
Leslie,
fun.
so
I hope
much.
I did okay. I never know
Yes,
what
you
I
did.
sound like.
Very nice.
But this was really fun.
Good. Glad you too.
So.